I still remember the sound. A sharp beep. Cold, metallic final. My badge, the same badge I'd used every morning for years, suddenly turned red at the glass gates of Orion Tower. The security guard looked away, embarrassed. People behind me shuffled impatiently. And just like that, I wasn't an employee anymore. I was an outsider, standing in the same lobby where I had once been celebrated for building the very system that kept this company alive. They didn't call it firing. They called it restructuring. They called it streamlining. But let's be honest, it was erasure. They didn't just remove me from payroll, they erased my name from every line of code, every document, every achievement. And the worst part? No one in that gleaming San Francisco skyscraper even looked surprised. It was as if they had rehearsed the scene. My manager wouldn't meet my eyes. HR slid the termination folder across the table with a smile that felt plastic. The new leadership team nodded, like they had just checked off another box on their to-do list. Inside, I kept asking myself, how can a decade of work vanish overnight? How can a person become invisible the moment their name is deleted from the system they created? But here's the truth. They thought they had silenced me. They thought erasing me was the end of the story. What they didn't realize was that I had left something behind, something they couldn't scrub out. Before I explain what happened next, where are you listening from? And tell me honestly, have you ever felt invisible at work? Leave a comment if this resonates with you. Your story might just help someone else feel less alone. 2 days after the badge incident, I was told to attend an all-hands meeting in the main auditorium at Orion Tower. It was one of those glass-walled theaters with spotlights that made the executives look larger than life. Rows of employees filled the seats, laptops half open, waiting for announcements about the company's future direction. I sat near the back. My name wasn't on the attendance list anymore, but the message had been clear: show up. Part of me hoped it was a mistake. Maybe someone would acknowledge what had happened. Maybe they'd realize how absurd it was to delete the architect of their core system. But deep down, I already knew the truth. When the lights dimmed, Ethan Cross, the new CEO, stepped on stage. He was smooth, polished, the kind of speaker who treated every sentence like a headline. Behind him, a giant screen lit up with a slide deck. Bold letters read, "The Orion Platform Reinvented." Then came the knife. Designed, had been relabeled as Team Innovations. My decade of work rewritten into a story where I simply never existed. I remember gripping the edge of my chair so hard my fingers ached. People clapped politely, some even cheered, but I caught a few glances, the engineers who knew better. They shifted uncomfortably, yet stayed silent. Ethan smiled into the spotlight and said, "Our new leadership has streamlined the architecture. We've eliminated legacy dependencies." He paused for applause. Legacy, that was me. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a dependency to be deleted. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The humiliation burned, but beneath it, another feeling started to take shape. Quiet, deliberate, and unshakable. I sat there erased in front of everyone and thought, if they believe I'm gone, maybe that's exactly when I can begin. A week after that meeting, the whispers started. People were careful not to say it directly to me, but news has a way of finding you, even when you've already been pushed to the edges. "They've appointed a new lead architect," someone murmured in the cafeteria line. Another voice added, "He's from a consulting firm. Big reputation, but not much hands-on." That's how I first heard Justin's name, Justin Hale, my replacement. I met him the following Monday in a handover session. HR insisted I attend. He walked into the conference room with the confidence of someone who had already been told the ending of the story. Designer sneakers, slick haircut, and a smile that felt more like a performance than a greeting. He sat across from me scrolling through a tablet. "So," he said casually, "can you walk me through the endpoints? I just need a high-level overview." I stared at him for a moment. Endpoints? High-level overview? This was the man they had chosen to streamline what I had spent years architecting down to the smallest detail. I pulled up a diagram on the projector, the kind of map only someone who had lived inside the system could truly understand. As I explained the layers, the dependencies, the failsafes, his eyes glazed over. He nodded occasionally, jotting down buzzwords. I realized he wasn't listening for comprehension. He was listening for language he could repeat later in front of investors. Inside, something twisted. Rage, yes, but also disbelief. They had replaced precision with presentation, substance with shine. When the session ended, he extended a hand and said, "Don't worry, Clara, I'll take it from here." I shook his hand, forcing a smile, but in my chest a quiet thought formed. You have no idea what you're holding. And as he walked out of the room, I already knew. If they wanted him to own my system, I would make sure the system itself remembered who really built it. After that handover with Justin, I went home and sat in front of my laptop long into the night. The city lights of San Francisco flickered through my apartment window, and the quiet hum of my computer filled the silence. I stared at the codebase, the very system I had poured myself into for years. And I realized if they were determined to erase me from the story, then I needed to leave behind something they could never scrub out. I didn't want destruction. That was too easy, too messy. What I wanted was memory, a reminder built into the bones of the system, something subtle, something alive. That's when the idea of the heartbeat came to me. I wrote a module buried deep in the architecture, nothing flashy, nothing obvious, just a small piece of code that pulsed quietly in the background. Every few minutes, it checked the system's core identity. If the recognized author matched, it simply passed along like nothing had happened. But if the system no longer recognized me, if my name had been stripped out, the heartbeat would stir. It would whisper into the logs, a message only the attentive could see. Consult the original architect. It wasn't sabotage, it was truth. A thread of honesty stitched into a machine now running on lies. As I typed, I gave the variables names only I would understand. Playful nods to the Golden Gate Bridge, to my favorite coffee shop, even to an old joke with my former team. To anyone else, it looked like harmless clutter. But to me, it was a pulse, a reminder that the system still remembered me, even if the company pretended not to. By the time the sun started to rise, I leaned back in my chair and felt a strange calm settle over me. They had taken my title, my credit, my seat in the tower. But inside the code, my fingerprint was still there, beating softly, waiting. And I couldn't help but wonder how long until someone noticed the sound of that pulse. It didn't happen all at once. That's the beauty of it, or maybe the cruelty, depending on how you see it. The first cracks appeared quietly, so small most people would have ignored them. But I noticed, and I knew exactly what they meant. A ticket came in about a dashboard glitch. Safari users complained that graphs wouldn't load properly. The junior engineer flagged it, but Justin brushed it off. "It's just a browser issue," he said, waving his hand like he was swatting a fly. I knew better. That wasn't a browser issue. That was the heartbeat, testing its voice. Days later, the operations team noticed event logs were off by a few seconds. Not enough to cause a crisis, but enough to frustrate clients who cared about precision. Once again, Justin dismissed it. It's noise. Data always has noise. His confidence was almost comical confidence, built not on understanding, but on the assumption that the system would always bend to him. I watched from a distance, reading the complaints in community forums, hearing whispers from old colleagues who still trusted me. "Things feel different," one of them messaged privately, "like the system has a mind of its own." They weren't wrong. My heartbeat was alive now. Not malicious, not destructive, just quietly resisting the lie they were trying to live. Every skipped metric, every delayed report was like a soft tap on the glass. I'm still here. You can't erase me. And as those taps grew more frequent, I knew it was only a matter of time before someone inside Orion stopped ignoring them. What would they do when the glitches could no longer be brushed aside? The first cracks had done their job. They had softened the ground, planted the seed of unease. But I knew glitches alone weren't enough. If I wanted the system to truly remember me, to force the truth into the open, I needed something more deliberate, something impossible to ignore once it was seen. That's when I wrote what I called the ghost class. It was hidden deep inside the code, tucked away in a folder that looked boring enough for most engineers to skip right over. On the surface, it looked like harmless legacy scaffolding, the kind of clutter every large system collects over time. But buried inside was a simple directive. If the system ever ran without recognizing me as its original architect, the ghost class would quietly inject a message into the build logs. Consult the original architect. Not an error, not a crash, just a phrase that lingered like a whisper, a reminder. I remember the night I finalized it. The room was dark, except for the glow of my screen. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard, not out of doubt, but out of gravity. This wasn't sabotage. It wasn't revenge. It was something cleaner than that. It was truth embedded in plain sight. When I pushed the last line, I felt something I hadn't felt since my badge turned red: control. They had taken away my voice in the boardroom, erased me from the slides, replaced me with a figurehead who spoke in buzzwords. But inside the machine, my voice still lived. And machines, unlike people, don't lie forever. I leaned back, listening to the hum of my laptop cooling down. Somewhere, sometime soon, someone at Orion would see those words in a log they couldn't explain. And when they did, the question would no longer be whether I had been erased. The real question would be what else had they overlooked. After weeks of watching Orions on the outside, I finally felt the weight of distance settling in. My badge was gone, my desk reassigned, my name stripped from the system. And yet, every night, I still caught myself opening old files, scanning through code I knew better than my own reflection. It was like watching a child you had raised being raised now by strangers. Then, out of nowhere, came the email. It was from a small startup in Boston, Helix Systems. Their CTO, Lena Brooks, had heard about me through an old colleague. The message was simple: we're building something new. We've read between the lines of what happened at Orion. If you want to start fresh, we want you here. For the first time in months, I felt my chest loosen. I flew out to Boston the next week. Helix was nothing like Orion Tower. No polished glass walls, no staged speeches, just a converted loft above a coffee shop, whiteboards covered in sketches, engineers who actually listened instead of waiting for their turn to speak. Lena shook my hand and said, "You'll never be invisible here. If you build it, we'll make sure your name stays on it." It was exactly what I needed to hear. Not revenge, not flattery, just recognition, the thing Orion had stolen most ruthlessly. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I could leave the past behind. I could build something cleaner, freer, away from the politics and arrogance of San Francisco. But the truth is, Orion still loomed in my mind like a shadow. They hadn't just erased me, they were parading my work as if I had never existed. And deep inside, I knew the heartbeat was still pulsing, waiting for its moment. So while I unpacked my things in Boston, my thoughts drifted back to the West Coast. Because no matter how far I ran, the countdown inside Orion was already ticking. The email hit my inbox on a Wednesday morning. A press release from Orion, bold and shiny. "Join us for our global demo day," streamed live from San Francisco. The headline alone made my pulse quicken. They were preparing to show the world the very system they had stolen, dressed up as something new. I clicked the link. The event was scheduled for Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, just 2 days away. At Helix, the team buzzed with their own projects, but I could hardly focus. My eyes kept darting to the clock, then back to my laptop. Somewhere inside Orion Tower, the code I had once nurtured was still running, And buried deep inside that code, the heartbeat waited, quiet but alert. I wondered how much they had changed since I left. Had Justin actually touched the architecture, or was he still parading diagrams and buzzwords? Did anyone in that building suspect that the foundation of their grand presentation wasn't as steady as they believed? The hours dragged, then raced. Thursday night, I barely slept, pacing the floor of my Boston apartment. Part of me felt nervous, guilty even, as if I had left a secret time bomb ticking. But it wasn't destruction I had planted, it was memory. And if they had chosen to erase me, then the system itself would remind them of the truth. By Friday morning, I brewed a coffee and opened my laptop. My screen showed 2 windows: Helix work on one side, the Orion live stream countdown on the other. A bold clock ticked down the seconds. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1. My heart matched the rhythm of that countdown. At exactly 11, the stage lights in San Francisco flared, and Ethan Cross walked out, smiling, confident, ready to unveil his platform to the world. And somewhere beneath those polished words, the system began listening. The clock had reached 0. The real countdown had just begun. The live stream began flawlessly. Bright lights, polished suits, the skyline of San Francisco shimmering behind the glass. Ethan Cross paced the stage with the ease of a showman, every sentence landing like a rehearsed headline. Today, he declared, we unveil the future of Orion. Applause filled the auditorium. Investors leaned forward in their seats. Screens lit up around the world, mine included. For a moment, I almost believed they would pull it off, that they could carry my work into the spotlight and claim it as their own without consequence. Then came the demo. At first, everything looked smooth. Justin appeared on stage beside Ethan, walking the audience through charts and graphs. He clicked into the platform, showcasing dashboards, integrations, the polished interface. But just 3 minutes in, the rhythm faltered. A graph froze mid-animation. The cursor hovered awkwardly. He clicked again. Nothing. I could see the flicker of panic in Justin's forced smile. Just a minor delay, he muttered into the mic. He refreshed the screen. This time, the entire dashboard stalled. A silent beat passed. Then 2. The audience shifted in their seats. On the live stream, I watched the camera cut to a wide shot, trying to hide the tension. But the logs I could see from a mirrored server told me the truth. The heartbeat had stirred. Lines of code flashed across the system. A single phrase repeated, buried in the build output. Build author unrecognized. Another pause. Then again, bolder this time. Consult the original architect. The auditorium was silent now. Investors whispered to one another. Ethan leaned toward Justin, his jaw tight, whispering something sharp, the kind of whisper you never want to hear on stage. I leaned closer to my laptop, pulse steady, eyes fixed. The cracks had widened into a canyon. The system wasn't crashing, it was speaking, and the longer it spoke, the harder it became to pretend I didn't exist. What would happen when the name it carried inside finally surfaced for everyone to see? The silence in that auditorium stretched so long, it almost felt physical. You could hear the shifting of chairs, the nervous cough of someone in the second row. Justin kept clicking furiously, trying to push past the freeze, but the system refused to obey. Then the screen flickered. For a moment, it was just static, a glitch in the feed. But when the lines of code appeared, they weren't random. They were deliberate. Build, author Clara Hayes. My name. Bold, plain, undeniable. It stayed there on the massive display, pulsing like a heartbeat, refusing to disappear. I leaned closer to my laptop in Boston, my breath caught in my chest. I had imagined this moment 100 times, but seeing it unfold live in front of the very people who had erased me felt unreal. On stage, Ethan tried to recover, stepping forward with his hands raised. This is simply a logging error, he insisted, his voice a touch too high, his smile stretched too thin. But no one was convinced. The investors weren't tech experts, but they understood one thing. Systems don't lie without reason. Justin's face went pale. His usual confident posture crumbled as he stammered, we've streamlined, we've eliminated. He couldn't finish. The words dissolved under the weight of the truth on the screen. From the camera's angle, I could see the audience. Some investors whispered sharply to their assistants. Others pulled out phones, snapping pictures of the projection. They had come for a promise of innovation. Instead, they were watching a ghost return. I sat there with my coffee growing cold, heart steady for the first time in months. My name was no longer hidden in code. It was out in the open, undeniable, unerasable. And yet, I knew this was only the beginning, because once the world asked who Clara Hayes was, they would have to answer. The moment my name appeared on that screen, the room at Orion Tower fractured. Investors who had been leaning forward with excitement now sat back, their expressions sharp and suspicious. Phones buzzed, assistants whispered. The illusion Ethan had built with carefully polished words and glossy slides crumbled in real time. Ethan tried to regain control. This is nothing more than a technical hiccup, he said, his voice breaking on the word hiccup. But the audience wasn't buying it. One of the lead investors, stood her voice carrying through the hall. Are you telling us this entire system is built on work that doesn't even belong to you? The question landed heavier than any line of code ever could. Justin fumbled with his laptop, his face flushed. He muttered something about legacy architecture and dependencies, but his excuses sounded like static in the air. The more he spoke, the clearer it became. He didn't understand what he was defending. And then came the words that sealed it. An older investor, calm but cutting, leaned into his microphone. We invest in builders, not ghost stories. The entire hall went quiet again. A sentence that simple carried more weight than any press release Orion could draft. I sat in Boston watching the feed, feeling a strange stillness. I wasn't in that room, but my presence filled it. The truth had broken through, and no note of corporate spin could patch the fracture. Ethan's jaw was tight, his composure shattered. Justin kept his eyes down. The investors exchanged glances that made the outcome certain. Money was leaving the table, and with it, the power Orion thought it held. That night, as I closed my laptop, I noticed a new message in my inbox from Ethan himself. Just 3 words. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long moment, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. The reckoning had only just begun. I never replied to Ethan's message. There was nothing left to say. No apology, no meeting, no promise could undo what they had chosen to erase. And honestly, I didn't need it anymore. The truth had already spoken louder than he ever could. In the weeks that followed, Orion unraveled quickly. Investors pulled back. Headlines spread about their demo day collapse. Justin quietly resigned, disappearing from the spotlight he had once craved. And Ethan? Well, he stayed on stage long enough to watch the empire slip through his fingers. As for me, I poured myself into Helix. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. The team valued my work, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. My name lived in every commit, every design note, every conversation. No one tried to erase it. No one had to. Looking back, the most painful part wasn't losing the job. It was realizing how quickly people could try to write you out of your own story. That's a kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than a contract or a paycheck. But the system I built, the heartbeat I left behind, reminded me of something important. You don't have to scream to be remembered. Sometimes all it takes is leaving a truth that can't be denied. And maybe that's the lesson. Titles fade. Companies rise and fall. But the real work we do, the pieces of ourselves we pour into what we build, that stays. It carries our name, even when others try to erase it. So I'll leave you with this. What would you do if someone tried to erase your story? Have you ever felt invisible, only to find a way to make your voice heard again? Share your thoughts below, because your story might be the reminder someone else needs today.